Hello there. Hope you all are having a good morning. Welcome to my studio. Today we are going to be working on pitchers. We're going to try to make one from start to finish. So we will, and I've never done this before, but I thought it would be nice since I didn't prepare ahead of time to have a pitcher ready to put a handle on to kind of show you the finished piece. I thought we would try to make a pitcher and then put a handle on it right away, and we'll see how that goes. No idea if that's going to work or not, but we'll give it a try. At least we'll get the pitcher form made, and we'll see that. And then we will pull a handle. You'll see how to pull a handle, and then we'll try to attach it. And I did have an idea with that, with attaching the handle right away. I thought maybe everything would shrink together a little bit more. Sometimes, and this isn't the pitcher that we're gonna make, but so I'll make the pitcher form, and then it'll be about leather hard, which is usually whenever I'll add a handle onto something. I'll attach it onto here, hold it, I'll pull a handle, pop it onto there. All is well and good. That's the way I do all my mugs, things like that. But then, so the pot is already shrunk and it's a little bit more dry. Sometimes I'll get little cracks around here because when I put a handle on a pitcher, I try to make it a little bit more substantial. So there's a lot of clay, it shrinks more, and then the height here, you know, the clay is shrinking so much that it ends up pulling away. So I was hoping that if I can make it happen, you know, that would be a kind of a fun learning experience that I can just put a handle on right away. We'll see if it works or not. So, you know, to alleviate the cracking problem, usually I'll throw the pitcher, wait for it to set up a bit, and then I'll pull a handle, let it dry out on a board, and then I'll pop it onto there and just kind of attach it. So there's not too much, you know, pulling the handle off the pot, but just a little bit more of attaching. So I was thinking if we do it all wet, maybe it all shrinks together and the attachments are a little bit stronger, everything shrinks well. We'll see if it works or not. So it'll be a little bit of a trial and error, but hopefully at least we get a pitcher form made. Now this is not the shape that we're going for. We're going to be doing a shape inspired by Phil Rogers, a very wide base, comes up straight, and then kind of necks in a little bit. So the main difference between that form and this one would just be the bottom section. So the one I'm going to make is going to come down a little bit more straight. And then one thing that I like about it coming in here, I usually put a handle on the top half of the pitcher, and I don't want your hand to be sticking too far out. If I just make a bulbous form, the handle has to stick out really far, and I feel a little bit detached. If this comes in, I can get my hand here, and more of the volume is sitting here. So my hand is a little bit closer to where much of the weight of all the water is going to sit. And it doesn't feel like it's going to break the handle off. Sometimes if you make like a really bulbous pitcher, all this water is stored down here. And to get it out, you have this large belly here. You have to turn it so much, and then you get to here, right? But there's still all this volume and the water is sitting into here. By the time you're doing this, you still have to go more and more. And I feel like there's this instability with the handle. You kind of feel like there's a lot of weight on there. Is it going to be able to take it or not? So with my pitchers, I prefer a little bit more of a slender form as opposed to a bulbous one, where it holds all that liquid and it's so hard to get it out that you almost have to pour it upside down. That's not the way that I want something to pour. So generally, just a little bit more of a cylinder shape, a little bit of a belly here so it can hold a little bit more. And we're going to be doing a little bit, we're going to put some lines in around the rim, and yeah, let's give it a try. We have a couple more here. This is more of like a decorative pitcher. I throw these in two pieces, throw this, and then kind of neck it in. Now without the handle here or the lip, this is kind of a nice vase form. And really, this is more of a vase, and it's just kind of a fun take on a vase. The neck on here really holds the stems of the flowers, widening out and allowing for the blooms to be there. Nice container for the liquid on the stems. generally I find that this shape works pretty well for many arrangements. I know it's kind of standard and, you know, it may seem a little redundant, overdone, but it does work. Not saying that works the best for every type of bloom. You know, if you're growing certain types of blooms, maybe people want a different shape for what they're trying to display, but that works well for general bouquets. Nothing too special for tools. We have our 2 sponges. We have a larger rib for throwing, a wooden knife. We'll see if we want one of these rubber ribs. Maybe it'll come in handy. Sponge on a stick. So it's just a dowel. If you don't have a dowel, just go get a stick from outside. Take one of your throwing sponges and rubber band it on. You got a sponge on a stick. So when you have a taller form, you get the water out of the inside. You don't have to stick your hand in there to disrupt the form. Just make a quick sponge on a stick. You don't need to buy a fancy one. For the handle, we have a wire knife and a little dowel. You need that for putting some of the shape on there. And we'll get started. We have about 4 pounds of clay. For pitchers, I like to use something a little bit stiffer than I would for a mug. I don't want, so we're throwing a larger form and you need a little bit of a stiffer clay to get it up tall and thin. We don't want the pitcher itself to weigh too much. By the time you put water inside of there, you know, water, if you're making a half-gallon pitcher, what's that, like 4 pounds of water, already more in there. We're dealing with 4 pounds of clay. So, you know, we're doubling the weight of that. We want this pitcher form to be as light as possible. When I make these, I'm going to want to make multiples, so I don't want like rock hard clay where my wrists are going to be hurting by the end of it. But, you know, with a mug, it definitely takes something a little bit softer. This may be a little bit on the softer side. I tried to wedge it for a little while to get some of the moisture out. I was saying this design is inspired by Phil Rogers, English potter. Lots of salt-fired pottery. You know, this is just one pitcher form. All sorts of fun things you can do with this. One thing I like about making this one, I've only made it like 4 or 5 times. I'm there in a kiln right now that's being fired. Is how wide the base is. So much of my work, I narrow in that base. So this is kind of goes against a lot of things that I tend to do, which is fun. So we'll work on getting this nicely centered. I do like this to be pretty well centered. I could probably throw it a little bit taller and more even if the clay is nicely centered. You know, I don't spend a lot of time centering for bowls and mugs and things like that. Kind of center it as I go. I got that sitting pretty well now. I don't like to trim pitchers. They get to be cumbersome. When we add the lip onto there, it usually knocks the rim off center, and maybe part of it is raised, so it's hard to set it down on something to get it trimmed properly. And the timing gets to be a bit of an issue. So if I want to put it in a chuck or a cylinder that holds it, to be able to trim it, it has to be fairly well set up. But at that point in time, you can't really put a handle on it because it'll be too dry. So our goal is to make this the right weight, the proper weight right away. So we'll come out pretty far. The base.
Your dad said I can see why your wrist gets sore.
Yes, it can happen rather easily. And one thing I do forget when I'm centering, especially with stiffer clay, I believe I've talked about this in the past, is not to bend or crook your wrist when you're trying to cone the clay up and down. You know, if I'm pushing here and I'm pushing the weight back here, or if I'm pushing against the clay here, you know, it puts a lot of pressure right on my wrist, and that'll really wear it out. So you really want to make sure that you're coming at it straight, the pressure coming into the palm, so it's going through your arm and not torquing your wrist. A lot of those little things can kind of go by the wayside when you're not thinking about, you know, it's just kind of like lifting something, lift with your legs. You got to think about it every time until it becomes a habit. Otherwise you can hurt yourself. And even if it's just a minor sprain, I'm not saying like you actually sprain your hand or something, but even if you just tweak your wrist a bit, you know, it can slow you down and kind of put you out of commission for a couple of days, and little things like that can add up. Nobody wants that. Alright, so we'll start with pulling this up here. Depending on what I plan on doing with the pouring spout, I like to leave a fair amount of clay up on top. I don't want that to get too thinned out yet. I can always thin it out more later, but if I keep it a little bit thicker, I can keep it compressed. It'll help keep control over the entire form. I haven't thrown for a little bit. So if we make a mistake on this one, I have another piece of clay ready to go. First pot of the day can sometimes not be the best one. We'll just see how it goes. Maybe I had too much coffee already. Feeling a little wiggly. When I'm pulling this cylinder up, definitely trying to keep it coming up and in. That tends to be the best way to get your height working. I can already tell that this is going to be interesting when we try to put a handle on here. So maybe it'll be kind of funny. Maybe it'll work. Maybe we'll learn something. That's about as far in, I think, as we want the bottom to go. You can see the clay getting a little wiggly. That usually means it's getting about as thin as it wants to go. Kind of pay attention to that. Listen to it. Alright. Start putting a little bit of a shape in here. So we'll come up relatively straight up and down. And the proportions for this piece can be a little bit difficult depending on how high you get, how wide it should be down here. We'll see, maybe we need to bring in this bottom just a touch more based on how high we got it. You know, if it was taller, we could keep it a little bit wider on the bottom. Just thinking about our proportions. And this is one reason why I like to make runs of pots, is I'll make this one and then I'll look at it and say to myself, oh, you know, I think this next one I want want the proportions to be a little bit different. Maybe I need it a little bit wider on the bottom, maybe a little bit skinnier. But you don't get to do that if you just make one. All you get to say is, oh well, I guess I didn't do it right. You don't get to kind of tell yourself, oh, well on the next one we'll try to do it like this. So then you just fiddle with this for as long as it takes. Try to get it right. And I'm not saying it's always going to be the case, but oftentimes the more you work it, the worse it gets. Sometimes that's not the way it works. You like there to be some spontaneity and freshness to the piece. Alright, so hopefully you can see that we're already setting ourselves up for the handle to come off here and land about here. That's the plan. So then, you know, there's a nice indent for your hand to sit there, and then the weight is sitting right here, so your hand is right above where all that weight is to hold it. And we'll get the water out of the bottom with their specialty tools. Okay. Now what do we want to make these lines with? We'll try this rib. We want 2 or 3. I don't know. Do we want these lines to be made with a tool or our fingers? There it is on there for fun. Alright, so kind of got that going. And I want this whole thing to kind of angle in a little bit more. You can see where it's getting soft right there. So we have some lines, definitely not exactly what I had in mind. Sometimes we just see what we get. I'm going to fold this up on the bottom. I didn't cut that little skirt off. So we have this line here, and the thickness of this, I'm going to try to match somewhat to the grooves that are coming up on these. See, I'm doing 3. Maybe on the next one I just want 2. Then we can make 2 of them and then compare them to each other. Last time I was making these, I didn't know if I needed another line right here. Kind of where that transition point is. This could be a bad idea. And you can work through some of these on paper. Probably made it look a little bit more medieval there. Alright, that's the general gist of it. If you look at this, this could almost be a mug. Not the height, but the form. You can make this into a nice kind of medieval tankard style. Alright. Now this is the tricky part. When you saw me throwing it, it was getting a little bit wiggly right in here, a little bit loose. And we're going to be pulling this lip out here for pouring. And when we're pulling on here, it's going to be putting pressure right there. So we'll see what happens. We'll kind of have to pay attention to that. So I dried it and cleaned off my left hand, which is going to be holding the lip here over where I'm going to push the spout. And when I do this, I'm going to start a little bit bigger than I initially think I should. So I'm holding this. I'm not really pushing back or doing too much. It's just holding the pot there. And I'm slowly working this out. Just rocking back and forth. Maybe I'll pull out a little bit. When I do that, I don't know if you can see it, it makes a little bit of a burr right here. And I'm going to want to keep that little sharp burr edge on there. When I glaze the pot, that little sharp edge isn't going to want to receive as much glaze. So it's going to be a little bit more rough, maybe a little bit drier, and hopefully that'll cut the water off when we're pouring it so you don't get a dribbly spout. I'll come back and just lay it down a little bit more. If things start to buckle, I'll try to fix that. I'll just lay this down. One thing you can do, and I don't overdo it too much, is we can make a little bit of a throat right here to try to channel the water to tell it that it's going to be staying right there. So you can come in on the inside and push that out a little bit more. Just ever so slightly. And then on this pitcher form, so I think that's about where I want it, and I'm not going to touch up all these little finger marks and stuff too much. I'm just going to leave them there. I'll just kind of ruin everything if I try to do it now. I'm just going to take this back end and push it forward just a little bit. It almost makes it look like it's leaning forward just a touch, so it almost like it kind of wants to pour for you. Now on this, I did not pull the clay up. So one thing you can do is you sit here and you stretch the clay and pull it up to make more of a thin spout onto there. Now I didn't do that because I wanted to see these lines move through this manipulated area. So I just left that as is. So that would be the pitcher form. Now looking at it, you know, I got a number of critiques. I think maybe this should have been a little bit more slender down here. Maybe the whole thing should have been more narrow. But that's just kind of where you get. And I've drawn this pitcher out numerous times. And it's one thing to draw it on a piece of paper and another thing to come in and actually mold it. Now, onto a handle. And this is going to be tricky. We'll see how well this works. Forgot one thing here. When I was talking about the width of the spout, I don't want it too narrow like that because I'm going to try to approximately match the attachment point width of the handle to the width of the spout, and that should make it look pretty consistent and well thought out. If I just have a tiny little spout here and then a big handle attachment, the things look kind of out of proportion. But if I can connect these lines, or this width here, with the width of my handle, things should start to flow along a little bit more, just like when we're thinking about our lines, trying to match thicknesses of lines, and all that kind of good stuff. All right, so we have a little carrot of clay here, and whenever I'm pulling handles, I like to dip the clay in the water, not my hand if I can help it. Sometimes when things get real big, I'll put my hand in there. But if I dip my hand in the water, I'm I'm gonna take it out and all the water is gonna run down my arm. I'm gonna have a big mess, and then I eventually have an armpit full of water. And, maybe you like that. I don't. But if you do, you know how to achieve it. So, pulling handles. Similar to making a pot in the sense of the amount of water you want onto there. You don't want the clay to be gripping your hand so much that you're ripping it off. But if you have too much water on there, you're not getting any friction between the handle and your hand. And I'm pulling with a pretty wide hand grip here. I can make this more narrow very easily. It's hard to keep the width on here. And I want to keep this width pretty similar to the spout there. And also you think about if this is going to be a half-gallon pitcher, we have 4 pounds of clay already, and then 4 pounds of water. It's going to be a fair amount of weight. So we want a nice hefty handle. You don't want something thin that you think is going to break away. So I don't want to pull this too thin. If it's too thin, it doesn't feel right in my hand.
Cutter and Cutter says you need to write a book.
I'll work on it. I need some help with that. I can't write very well.
Hello. Hello. Y'all need any help with anything?
We're just looking, never been here.
All right, so we got pretty well done here.
Pottery, are you
The
doing pottery?
piece does
I'm one of
taper.
them. He's the main potter.
Oh,
He does Facebook Lives showing how to do different
So I
techniques.
got a little
he's
water
doing
on my hand here.
pictures today.
Now I'm gonna run my thumb. So one thing I kind of want to do is match the grooves in here to the handle.
All you want.
So I'm gonna put a groove down the middle, and then one on the side, one on the side. So I kind of get it sketched in a little bit, and then I can work those in a little bit. Work a little bit more there. All right, so we have our handle. I'm just gonna lay it down, cut it off.
He's from Minnesota.
wait, where?
And it's probably a little bit
He'll
long,
probably
so
wanna
we'll cut
talk
off
to you.
part of the bottom.
Probably you went to college or a lot of artists.
All right, so like I said, this is all approximate right now.
He did go to college up there. He did. And then he came down here and he took
We'll kind of see where it gets.
here, and then
And usually when the piece is more set up, we're able to
Yeah, when-
hold the pitcher and see kind of where things line up. If we have to stop, you know, manipulate it or tear some things off, we can a little bit more easily. But with everything being so wet, this may be
Really pretty.
something interesting. I'm gonna round this back edge off.
Okay. Wow.
I want to get this
Yeah, if y'all have questions.
close to
let
how
me
I
know,
want
okay?
it finished. Just like that. We're gonna soften these edges. Now one thing you can do here is angle this angle to match how you want it to come off of your pot. If you want it to come straight off, you can have a straight edge. If I want it to come up, I can angle this edge for the attachment point to do that. If I want it just to come down a little bit, we can do that. All right, so we got that tapered. Trying to keep my hands somewhat free of slip here. The more slip I have on my hands, the more they're gonna slide around on the pot here. So I'm gonna try to support it with my hand. If I just let it sit here, it's probably gonna crease and then fall off. Think about where I want it. Do I want it to sit down here? Do I want it up here? And that's another nice thing about working with multiples, is once again, you can sketch it all out, get all those ideas out, but then push come to shove, you have all these pieces here, and you have the proportions that you made them at, you know, these heights, and you can try put one here and see what it looks like, and then try put one up here and see what it looks like. And, in my opinion, there's only so much that you can do on a piece of paper, although it is good to work through it. So we're just gonna try to get it lined up across from the spout. We'll just kind of offer it up onto here. Push the clay into it. So I'm running my thumb up onto here. I'm not trying to blend it. Maybe I'll wiggle it a little bit. I don't want a blended handle. I like the idea of being able to see the attachment and not have it all just be one piece. All right, and then we'll set it here. And you can see the weight of this is not making it the pot too happy. And then that would go here. And then we'd blend this in. All right, so I'm learning that this is not gonna work because it eventually pulled that down, but maybe we're getting some fun ideas about how we could make this work. You know, if we looked at what's happening, right, and it's kind of pulling it and bending it and making some of these kind of fun, funky lines, maybe you can work with that in some way. Maybe I don't wait for it to be leather hard. Maybe it's cheese hard and it does get manipulated and some things like that. But generally, yeah, so your handle would sit like that and the whole piece would kind of be a little bit more like that. And I don't want a big gap in here. I don't want this handle coming all the way out. My hand is so far removed from where all the weight is. I want it to be as close as possible without running my knuckles onto here. And I want to be able to get a good grip, a nice hand hold onto there. So it's a nice thick handle. Overall, you know, not too bad. A little bit more of a stout pitcher, but that can make a nice statement as well. So that's that. Handle thing didn't quite work as well as we hoped, but you know, we made it through some ideas, and hopefully you have an understanding of some of the mechanics of a pitcher, where things are held in the form and how they should function properly. So I hope this helps out a little bit, and go make some on your own. Bye-bye.